We finally heard from Tennessee Titans president of football operations, Chad Brinker, and new general manager, Mike Borgonzi, on Wednesday, and it sounds like they want to trade back in the NFL draft. I'll explain why on today's edition of Locked On Titans.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. It was a massive day in Tennessee Titans land. We finally heard from Chad Brinker himself. We also finally heard from new general manager Mike Borgonzi. They had so much to say, so many interesting nuggets, and I'm going to break down all of it, from what they had to say about trading the number one overall pick to what Mike Borgonzi and Chad Brinker had to say about the roster situation, and we'll break down the power structure for the Tennessee Titans as we do have a little bit more clarity on that front. Before I dive into everything that you need to know from a big Wednesday, do want to thank you for making Locked On Titans your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day. Speaking of every day, shout out to my everydayers out there. Tuning in Monday through Friday. Couldn't do it without you guys. If you aren't an everydayer, you need to be one, because there's breaking news and big stories and big stuff to talk about with the Titans all season long, and nobody is going to recap it all and break it all down for you like I am here on Locked On Titans. Do want to give a shout out to a lot of you guys who expect the daily content. Yesterday, I was about to record the show, and my power literally went out for 5 hours. I put out a few social media posts to try to spread the message, but if you missed your episode yesterday, my apologies. It was below zero where I'm at, and the power went out for hours, and there's not much I could do in that situation. But with that being said, I think the Titans are trading back with the number one pick, and I think they gave us a pretty big hint as to that is their plan. So let me go through some of these quotes. Going to be a heavy quote day. We heard a lot from Mike Borgonzi and Chad Brinker, but Mike Borgonzi talked about draft picks being currency in the NFL. More draft picks, more money, more ammo, all of that. And he said, when you have the opportunity to trade back for more picks, you have to take it. He said, when we have the opportunity to trade back for more picks, we will take it. Mike Borgonzi also said he already has received trade calls for the number one overall pick. And I think it's so smart for him to say that, because number one, it shows that they are open for business with the number one pick. But two, it shows that there is already demand. So whether that is true or not, bravo, Mike Borgonzi, to say that publicly, so that if you're a team that is considering moving up to the number one pick and trading up, you know already from what Borgonzi has said that there is other competition out there that drives the value of the number one pick up, knowing that there are other people who are interested. So love that. So first off, that's where we start, is that Mike Borgonzi literally said, I've already taken calls, and if we can have an opportunity to trade back for more picks, we're going to take that. You combine that statement with what Chad Brinker said. Chad Brinker said he wants to have 30 draft picks in the next 3 drafts. He said he wants to have 12 top 100 picks. Okay, well, the Titans only have 8. The Titans have 8 top 100 picks right now, all right, in the next 3 draft classes. So how do you go from 8 top 100 picks to 12 top 100 picks? You trade back with the first overall pick. That is the best way to do it. Now, immediately what you could say is, well, the Titans could trade players. If the Titans traded other veteran players, that would help them acquire draft picks. But who on this roster is worthy of a top 100 draft pick other than Jeffrey Simmons and maybe Calvin Ridley? I doubt. Why would Calvin Ridley go for anything more than a 4th or 5th rounder? You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that would happen. So the only player on the team that is worthy of a top 100 draft pick is Jeffrey Simmons. And Jeffrey Simmons alone isn't going to get you from 8 top 100 picks to 12. So, Chad, how would you go from 8 top 100 picks in the next 3 drafts to 12? Well, Mike Borgonzi, it might be trading down from number 1 where you've already gotten trade calls. To me, it is clear and it is obvious. And look, you could say, hey, they're just playing the game. They're playing both sides. They're saying that they're willing to do it. Every general manager says we're open for business. We're willing to take calls, all that. But there is a clear outline here that we want to have more picks in the NFL draft, and they're not going to be able to get that by trading players. So how else would you do it? You know what I mean? Like the easiest, most efficient, most effective way to accomplish that vision that was laid out by the GM and the president of operations is to trade back with the number 1 pick. Now, I want to throw this in here. Chad Brinker and Mike Borgonzi both said, we quote, can't pass up on a generational talent. They said we're open to trading, but we're not going to pass up on a generational talent. Well, there is no generational talent. Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, regardless of what you think about them, if you love them, if you hate them, if you're in between, they aren't generational prospects. That's clear. You know, they may be good, they may, whatever you think, but even if you love those guys, there's no way you can look me in the face and tell me they're generational talents. That's not the case. And look, you could look at Travis Hunter and say, oh, it's got to be talking about him. He's the generational talent. He can play corner, he can play wide receiver. But is he going to be able to play both of those at the NFL level? I don't know. And if he doesn't play both ways and he just plays one position in the NFL, is he a generational talent at that one position? I think he's a pretty good wide receiver prospect. I think he's a really good corner prospect. But is he generational? I don't know. I don't know about that. And look, I love Abdul Carter. You guys know, my everydayers know, that my favorite player in the draft, number 1 prospect, is Abdul Carter. But is Abdul Carter generational? Is he like a Myles Garrett level prospect? No, that's not true either. And that's the guy that I like the most. And I can be honest and admit he's not generational. So there is no generational talent in this draft. It's not a great draft. So if they're saying that we're not going to pass up on a generational talent, but there is none, and they're saying that they want to have 12 top 100 picks in the next 3 years, and they only have 8 right now, and they're saying that they're open to a trade back to get more picks, and they're already getting calls for the number 1 pick, well, there you go. I mean, just put 2 and 2 together, connect those dots. You don't have to be a genius to connect all of those dots together. Now, I will say this. Mike Borgonzi talked about what he's looking for in a quarterback prospect, and he said they have to have the arm talent to make every throw. They have to be a great decision maker. They have to process coverage. They have to have mobility, and they have to be a leader. Well, I'm sorry, but Cam Ward doesn't make great decisions, and he's not super accurate if you look at the data of on-target percentage. And then Shedeur Sanders doesn't have great mobility and doesn't have the arm talent to make every throw. So both of those quarterbacks, by Mike Borgonzi's standards, are missing key tenets of what he's looking for. So I'm sorry. The quarterback's not meeting the criteria, the lack of generational talent in the draft, the need to get more top 100 picks, and the openness to trade back. Connect all of that together, and it seems pretty clear to me that the Tennessee Titans would prefer a trade back with the number 1 overall pick. Now, that's my theory. That's what I'm reading for this. Tell me what you guys think down below in the comments, or hit me up on Twitter at TicTacTitans, at Locked On Titans on Facebook and Instagram. But we got a lot more to discuss about the roster and Mike Borgonzi right now. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Talkspace. Therapy is a game changer. It can help you manage stress, improve sleep, and communicate more effectively. All things that I personally need. But finding the right therapist and fitting sessions into your busy schedule can be a challenge. That's where Talkspace comes in. Talkspace is the leading virtual therapy provider. It makes getting the help you need easy, accessible, and affordable. With Talkspace, signing up is simple. You can match with a licensed therapist who fits your needs, usually within 48 hours. And it's convenient. You can have sessions from the comfort of your home and even message your therapist between appointments. Plus, Talkspace is covered by many insurance plans, and for most insured members, there's a $0 copay. it has never been easier to prioritize your mental health. As a listener of this podcast, you'll get $80 off your first month with Talkspace when you go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnNFL and enter the code SPACE80. To match with a licensed therapist today, go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnNFL. Use that promo code SPACE80 to get $80 off your first month and show your support for the show. That's Talkspace.com/LockedOnNFL. Promo code SPACE80. Titans fans, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast, breaking down a monster day in Tennessee Titans land. We heard from Chad Brinker. We heard from Mike Borgonzi. I'm going over the highlights of those comments and of those discussions. We talked about all of the comments about the number one overall pick and why, in my mind, that leads me to believe that the Titans would prefer to trade down and collect more assets. That's basically how they're explaining it. And a lot of what we're about to talk about with Mike Borgonzi's vision of roster building with this team, a lot of that is going to point us in that direction as well. But before we go into what the Titans want to do going forward, I think it's important to get some analysis on what has happened so far. And Chad Brinker was very, very open on Wednesday about the fact that he did not agree with the Tennessee Titans offseason moves last year. Okay. He said, quote unquote, they weren't disciplined enough in free agency. He said that multiple times on the radio show that he went on early in the morning, and then again in his press conference with Mike Borgonzi later that day. He said we weren't disciplined enough in free agency. And it makes sense that Chad Brinker comes from Green Bay, and the Green Bay Packers historically do not spend in free agency. Them going after Xavier McKinney and Josh Jacobs this year was the most aggressive I remember the Packers being in free agency in a long time. As a lot of you guys know, I've been listening to the show for years. My dad's been a Packers fan since 1966. I have to discuss the Green Bay Packers all the time because that's what my dad wants to talk about. He doesn't just want to hear about the Titans. He wants to talk about his team too. My dad's like my best friend. We talk about everything. So I know everything that the Packers are doing all the time. Like I'm always tapped in to that. So I would know that historically speaking, the Green Bay Packers are very, very frugal in free agency. And you have to know that Chad Brinker was not on board with that. They talked over and over again throughout the day about how they need to draft and develop in homegrown superstars. Again, their comments about bringing in free agents, very telling. They said that, they want to supplement in free agency with blue-collar guys. Mike Borgonzi brought up a guy like Mike DeVito, brought up a guy like Anthony Fasano, who they signed early in his tenure in Kansas City. And they mentioned multiple times they want guys who are leaders, tough, gritty, veteran guys who are leaders. And to me, it's pretty clear that Chad Brinker did not like the free agency moves that the Titans made last year. And he didn't think that the players that they brought in were leaders in the locker room. I also want to say this. I just want to put on my tinfoil hat for a minute. I'll tell you, though, I don't think it's that crazy of a conspiracy theory. I think it's the most likely theory as to what truly happened. From Brinker's comments saying that they weren't disciplined enough in free agency, to their comments about draft and developing, to the comments that we're going to talk about later where they say, we need to add talent to the roster. There's some talent here, but we were a 3-win football team. I think it is pretty clear that this is what happened. Ran Carthon promised Amy Adams Strunk that they would win. He told her, if you give me this money, I am going to win games. Give me this money to go spend on these free agents, and I am going to win us games. We're going to build a good enough team to win games. And then they went 3-14. And the whole time, Chad Brinker was in the background going, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I don't know about that. So when the Titans go into the season and they're 3-14, Amy Adams Strunk goes, Chad was right. None of these moves made a difference. And then she fires Ran Carthon and promotes Chad Brinker. it is pretty clear what happened behind the scenes. Brinker was not fully on board with these moves. These are Ran Carthon moves. And Chad Brinker even said, I had a responsibility in the roster last year, but I didn't have authority. That is his exact quote. I had responsibility, but I didn't have authority. So he is telling you, I wasn't in charge. I didn't like all those moves. We need to draft and develop. We don't need to go spend $1 million in free agency. He is literally telling you how he feels through all of these comments. It is clear and obvious that Brinker promised, or that Ran Carthon promised winning with the free agency moves and the money, and they did not win. And Chad Brinker was hesitant about those moves. So Amy Adams Strunk said, I'm going to go with you. It's clear. It's clear. But anyways, moving right along. And I want to say this. If you look at the individual signings, Calvin Ridley wasn't a terrible move. Tony Pollard wasn't a terrible move. Lloyd Cushenberry is bad luck. He got injured. There, what can you do? It's a torn Achilles, What can you do there? But L'Jarius Sneed move totally backfired. Chido Awuzie was injury prone before they signed him. So we can't act surprised that he gets injured during the season. He's an injury prone player over the last few years. But let me say this. Even if the individual signings weren't terrible, in totality, they weren't enough. It was like putting a Band-Aid over a bullet hole. Yeah, you covered it up, but you're bleeding out. It's over. So, I know that we could sit here and argue the individual validity of the moves, but if you told Amy Adams Strunk that you were going to win games this year, she gave you all this money, and then you didn't, even if each individual move was okay, you should have known it wasn't going to be good enough to deliver on your promise. So again, it's not like each individual move, all of them were bad, but if you promised that all of those moves together would make something happen and it didn't happen, you still failed. So I think that's a fair way to look at it. And I think that's quite honestly the only way to look at it. Now, Mike Borgonzi, again, said that he wants to build a big physical team that plays fast. He wants to build through the trenches, draft and develop, supplement with free agency. We've heard all that before. That is the classic generic line in the NFL. But he also made the comment that there's some talent on the team, but we're a 3-win football team. They're telling you, and Brinker said that he talked to Amy Adams Strunk, and it's going to require patience to get this thing back in. Firing a coach and then a GM, and that's not going to work every year. So I think they are setting the expectations that this may be a slow build. They talked about the quarterback position, and Mike Borgonzi said quarterback is the most important position in sports. We're going to attack finding a guy, whether it be free agency, the draft, or on the roster. Chad Brinker also said in an interview that morning that they're going to give Will Levis a chance to be the starter again. Now, I wouldn't look too far into that, and we'll talk more about that in the coming days when we have time to flesh that out. But I think that they're just toeing the line in that regard. If you want to trade Levis, you don't come out and say he's not going to be on the team next year, because then you lose all leverage whatsoever. To the folks who say that Will Levis has zero value and they couldn't get, a bag of chips for him, you're just sadly misinformed. You just do not understand value. Will Levis could get traded right now. The Titans could get a 5th or a 6th round pick for him for sure. For sure. So to say that they couldn't get anything for him, a lot of Titans fans right now are just, I call it just self-hating. Nothing's going to work. This doesn't work. The hire doesn't work. It doesn't matter. Will Levis sucks. They couldn't get anything. It's just all excessively negative. The Titans could sign Jesus Christ to play quarterback. And there are Titans fans who would get in my comments and mentions and say this is going to be a complete failure. You know what I mean? There's an amount of Titans fans right now who are just self-loathing. So no matter what you say or what the Titans do or what happens, they're going to say this is going to fail. This sucks. This is bad. Blah, 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 blah. And we just have to move past those crybabies to have productive discussions going forward. But the thing that stood out the most to me is to talk about premium positions. The quote is, we need premium production at premium positions. Rushing the passer off the edge, blocking the edge rushers, playmakers on the outside that get turnovers and score touchdowns. That's what they talked about. And again, the premium positions, quarterback, offensive tackle, edge rusher, cornerback, wide receiver. Those are the 5 premium positions in the NFL. And thank God that somebody understands that you need to prioritize those. Not interior defensive line, not running back, not linebacker, not safety. Those are luxury positions that you can take once you build out the premium ones. So it made me feel very good. I got the warm and fuzzies hearing them talk about premium positions and how that's really where you win in the NFL. So with that being said, though, a lot of the conversation over the last 10 days to 2 weeks has been about the power structure for the Titans. We got a lot more clarity on that, and I feel a lot better about it. But there are still some unanswered questions, and mostly for the owner. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate. It truly is the best looking sportsbook app you're going to find. And the variety of bets are going to keep every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team, which we aren't, of course, or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Titans fans, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. We talked about the Tennessee Titans sounding like they want to trade back. We talked about Mike Borgonzi and Chad Brinker discussing this roster and what they want to do going forward and what they've done previously. But now I want to talk about the power structure conversation, because obviously that was a big portion of the questions that Chad Brinker was asked, and that was a large part of the answers that we wanted as fans as to what in the world is going on, who's in charge, who has final say, who's doing what. And quite frankly, we got a lot of clarity on that front on Wednesday. Before I explain it and go over the quotes, I do want to thank you again for making Locked On Titans your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. Make sure you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day. But to line this out, the power structure is Amy Adams Strunk at the top, Chad Brinker underneath her, Mike Borgonzi underneath Brinker, Callahan under Borgonzi. That is the clearly defined power structure for the Titans. Now, what does each position entail? Well, obviously, the owner is the owner. I don't need to explain what she does, okay? It's pretty clear. But Chad Brinker, if you've ever watched Game of Thrones, the position of Hand of the King or Hand of the Queen, that's what I would call Chad Brinker. Brinker is the hand of the queen, okay? Brinker even said, quote, "My role has evolved." He talked about his experience with the Green Bay Packers, of how he was trained as a scout initially, but then Russ Ball from the Green Bay Packers, who was a high-level executive, brought Chad Brinker under his wing to teach him about operations, cap management, the business side of the football operation. So that is what Chad Brinker is, all right? He is not the primary football executive like we were all thinking, all right? He is the CEO of the football operation. He is the hand of the queen. He is basically Amy Adams Strunk stand-in. He is in charge of the field operations, the equipment operations, the data analysis, the scouting department, the medical aspect, the operations of, think about, the food, the transportation, the scheduling, all of those different things. Chad Brinker is going to handle all of those things. And he talked pretty extensively about how the NFL has evolved. We talked as fans of the team last offseason. Part of the excitement was they're growing their analytics staff. They're growing their strength and conditioning staff. They're growing their medical staff. The Titans are going from a mom and pop shop to a Fortune 500. The Titans are going from Main Street to Wall Street. The Titans are, growing up into a bigger organization. Well, who is going to handle all of that? The increase in work, the increase in responsibility. Previously, the general manager of the football team would handle all of that stuff that I just mentioned and have to build the roster. But the departments and the growth of the organization has gotten to a point where that can't be the case anymore. You can't manage the field, the equipment, the data staff, the scouting staff, the medical staff, the operations, the food, the travel, all of that, while also building the roster and making trades and clearing the waiver wire and setting the 53. And it's too much for one person. So now the Titans have Chad Brinker doing all of that executive level stuff. And Mike Borgonzi can just be the general manager. And that will entail focusing on the players, focusing on the roster. So Chad Brinker said he doesn't know why Amy Adams Strunk picked him, but when she told him that she was going to fire Ran Carthon, she asked him to be the leader. She asked him to assume the role of leadership for the football operation. She asked Chad Brinker to lead the football operation. So that is what he does. The general manager, again, focused on trading, scouting, free agency, signings, waiver wire, setting the 53-man roster, undrafted free agency, all of that stuff. So Borgonzi is doing waivers, and Chad Brinker is going to be used as the tiebreaker. But both of them discussed how at their previous stops in Green Bay and then Borgonzi in Kansas City, the final say on the roster never was an issue. They were never so in disagreement that it became a problem. They worked together. So I think some of the stuff about the final say, Chad Brinker has the final say on all things football. But Mike Borgonzi isn't going to get overruled. And quite frankly, Chad Brinker and Brian Callahan in an interview with A to Z Sports both used the same example of, hey, there are going to be disagreements, but if a guy wants to draft somebody in the 6th round, he's not going to have his hand slapped when he goes to try to put the guy on the board. That's both Brinker and Callahan said the hand slap thing. Clearly, the public relations department for the Titans had them rehearse these answers. That is obvious. That the way that they answer certain questions was 100% rehearsed with a public relations person before they all went out and started giving these answers. Okay? So, regardless of that, I think we have a clear vision here of Brinker as the executive over top, but Mike Borgonzi is the general manager and the primary football executive who is handling football responsibilities. Borgonzi said having the number 1 pick, $50 million in cap space. Chad Brinker was a big reason he wanted to take the job. The city of Nashville was a big reason he wanted to move his family, and the organization as a whole he felt very comfortable with. That's all great to hear, but more importantly than anything, we know the power structure, we know the ladder, we know who's responsible for what. That's what's most important. Now, there are some questions that we did not get answered because the question was asked, why was Ran Carthon fired and you and Brian Callahan weren't? Why was Ran Carthon the only one responsible for the 3-14 product that was put out there? And Chad Brinker said, I can't answer that question. Amy told me she was firing Ran. Amy told me she wanted me to lead the GM search. Amy told me she wanted me to be the leader of the football operation. So Chad Brinker just threw his hands in the air and said, I don't have an answer for you. Well, that's bullcrap, quite honestly. The fact that we don't have an answer as to why Ran Carthon fell on the sword. Why was Ran Carthon the only one held responsible? That's a question for Amy. Brinker even said that. Amy didn't even go to the press conference. She wasn't even there. Tell me the last time a general manager was introduced in the NFL and the owner of the team was not present. When has that ever happened before? To me, it's pretty clear. Amy Adams Strunk is embarrassed and angry and frustrated with what's happened over the last few years. She doesn't want to show her face. She wants this to be over with. Let's get the pomp and circumstance done and let's get back to work. But for her to not even show up at the press conference, that really surprised me, because Titans fans deserve the answer of why was Ran Carthon fired and nobody else was held accountable. We deserve that answer. How did Chad Brinker get hired by Ran Carthon and then jump him in responsibility from a football guy to the highest executive on the football side? How does that all happen? What's your thought process there? We deserve those answers as Tennessee Titans fans who pour our time, our energy, and our money into this football team. And we're not going to get them. So since we're not going to get them, I guess we move on. No reason to discuss it any further. She's never going to talk to the public until the team starts winning again. That's front runner behavior. That's pretty frustrating, but that is what it is. But with that being said, that is going to do it for today's episode, recapping a monster Wednesday for the Tennessee Titans. Make sure you get subscribed, stay subscribed. That's going to do it for me today, though, folks. As always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.